welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank. Got the world behind me here. I'm overlooking the entire globe, and I'm assessing everything that's wrong with the world today. Because that's what I do best here, right? I keep an eye on everything and everybody and everywhere. So, it's interesting, guys, because, I talk about immigration a lot because I'm a byproduct of immigration, right? My entire family immigrated here in the 1960s, early to mid 60s. And so I have a perspective on it. I don't know if I call it a unique perspective, considering there was millions of Italians that immigrated all over the world, including America, right? You got your Irish experience, you got your German experience, your Polish, but the Italian experience, or really, for the most part, the Sicilian experience, because that's what you had a lot of Sicilians that fled here, different parts, different eras, different times, right? And just kind of studying lots of Italian history as I have. Not that I'm an expert on it. It's something that I've casually looked at and just coming to some broad conclusions, I guess you could say. It's been interesting because the Italian peninsula has gone through some radical changes over the past 150 years, and how that's affected Italians and Sicilians in many ways is important to understand. I think the fact that, like I said to you in the previous podcast, the Masonic influence, right? Garibaldi lands in Sicily. He lands in my father's hometown of Marsala and begins to take over the island one by one, town by town, with his 1,000 red shirts. And eventually they make their way up the Italian peninsula, all the way up to Rome. And they surround the Vatican, they surround the papacy. Again, a Freemasonic revolution, and how that effectively changed Italy, and how, in some respects, I'm not sure you could have called it an organic sort of change or an organic movement in that respect, because Garibaldi was not Italian. I believe it was French, if I'm not mistaken. And because he was Masonic, it ran contrary to predominantly Catholic faith. But again, we're talking about an era in time where the Masonic revolution, which actually began in America, right? Because the American Revolution was the first of the grand Masonic revolutions in 1776, right? And then that spread to France. We had the French Revolution, all the other revolutions that preceded after that. That's why when you look at the world, right, when we're switching from the old kingdom, right, the old Christian world, and into the new Freemasonic, post-enlightenment secular world, there really is this era of revolution, and one by one the old world is taken down. Now you could argue it begins at the Protestant Reformation, where Northern Europe really collapses up there. Protestants overtake that area. You got a bunch of kings over there that cut political deals with Luther and things like that. You got King Henry doing his own thing up there, cutting brides' heads off over there and things like that. But it begins there. But when you get to the 17th, 18th century era, and you get this wave of revolutions, it's about taking over the continent. And really, you got the full fruition of it at the end of really the beginning of the 20th century with World War I. And World War II was really the last straw, in my opinion, where everything went down. The old world was taken down. And I think there's lots of nuances there. And I think there's lots of interpretations of history that, from a classical liberal perspective, I think that are somewhat dubious. Let's put it that way, right? I'm not suggesting there was any good guys, or no, I shouldn't say that. There was some good guys, actually. But I'm not suggesting that everything in the Catholic world was perfect. But we have to understand the context in which the Catholic world was changing, and how it was being attacked by Masonic ideology, starting again, really, if you don't want to take the American Revolution in that context, because it wasn't in Europe, then I guess you would go to the French Revolution, which was 10 years after the American Revolution, right? And we've seen how the American founding fathers supported the French Revolution, at least vocally in some respects, right? Thomas Jefferson gave it a full endorsement, right? And Benjamin Franklin was over there checking things out himself over there. And so you got to understand this Arab Revolution really shaped the entire world. And every country in that respect probably has its own unique story. And so does Italy for that matter. But I think as the Masonic Revolution really kicked in and Garibaldi goes up that Italian peninsula, it begins to change things. And, some people have asked the questions, were the Italians better off before or after the unification of Italy? And, this is a question that historian Charles Colomb kind of answered. And he said that, well, if you look at Italian immigration, which is, again, Italians being very familially or family oriented in that respect, before the revolution in around 1860, right around there, hardly any Italians left Italy. Hardly any Italians migrated outside of Italy. After the unification, after Garibaldi was there, that's where you see the mass exodus from Italy. And hundreds and thousands of Italians begin to leave for greener pastures, right? America, the United States, Argentina, Canada, all different areas, because there was some fundamental factors there that began to hurt the economy and social factors as well too. And that's where I think a lot of Italy's problems begin, right? And then we go through these crazy kind of revolutions, right? And you got a monarchy that's kind of liberal. I think the monarchies, because they're watching other monarchies in the 1700s or early first half of the 1800s starting to fall, the monarchies are kind of reading sort of the warning signs and they become weak or more liberal in that respect. And the monarchies are kind of weak. And you got lots of events, but you got an overall grand revolution, right? Kind of like today we have a revolution, right? The writings on the wall right now. We got a communist revolution sweeping throughout all of the West, even in America here, right? Marxist revolution, right? It's kind of that way too. It almost felt like an inevitable shift was happening in Europe and Western civilization, that liberalism and the Masonic revolutions were coming. They were coming, and it's inevitable that everybody sort of cave in that respect. And that's where a lot of Italian history gets a little murky. And you got the king over there that allows Garibaldi to kind of do his thing. Garibaldi gives the power back, but everybody sees the writing on the wall. The monarchy is going to hold power as much as he can, but with World War I and World War II coming up soon, it wasn't going to be long. All monarchies were eventually going to surrender, with the exception of a couple here and there, smaller islands, things like that. And so you got to ask yourself the question, where does this leave Italians and immigration? So World War I comes along, Italy takes a devastating loss, and after that time, Mussolini comes into power. Now, I find Mussolini a very interesting character. I know from our classical liberal perspective, he's viewed as a bad guy, right? Because he's a fascist and things of that nature. And, we believe in democracy, the will of the people, the right to self-governance. And that's fine. I'm more indifferent toward Mussolini. As I said before, Mussolini arises out of a confused time for Catholic nations as they're trying to get a hold of what they're going to be. They're being attacked from the West by classical liberals, and they're being attacked from the East by Bolsheviks. And I think you see lots of these kind of issues playing out. You see it in Spain with Franco, right? Franco depicted it as a murderous right-wing fascist thug. But Spain was being invaded by Bolsheviks, right? That had to be dealt with. You had same problems or similar problems in Portugal, another Catholic nation led by a devout Catholic integrist leader. Bolsheviks are coming in. Communists are coming in. You got the Masons in America. You got the Masons in England that are trying to enforce their values here. And one of the things you see really at the end of World War II is a race between America and the Soviet Union to rush into Italy to get their ideology implemented, right? Italy loses World War II. It's devastated. And guess who really was in the position of power? It was America was in a position of power to get in there and influence Italy more than Russia, or what would become the Soviet Union, I guess, or what was the Soviet Union, I guess. because Russia had some infrastructure damage. It was a little bit more difficult, right? Because the Germans had gone in there. America suffered no infrastructure, none. That was the one advantage that America had, of course. And America got in here and imposed its American democracy. Now they'll say, well, wait, Italians voted on it, right? And the monarch allowed for it. The monarch allowed for the vote in Italy in 1948, I believe, when the vote took place, and it narrowly passed. And with democracy, well, you know me, I have my problems with it, let's put it that way. But regardless of that notion, I think what the unification of Italy started within these Catholic nation and Catholic cultures began to, I guess, make light of the faith, began to attack the Catholic faith, which was so strong and so powerful. Remember when the Protestant Reformation broke out, it affected Germany, it affected the northern part of Europe, like the Scandinavian nations, the Netherlands, those countries up there. But the Protestant Reformation really didn't affect Italy all that much. Protestantism never really made inroads in Italy. And being Italian, I think it's because, you know, Italians are sharp in a lot of ways, right? We're stubborn in a lot of ways, but we're also sharp, and we can smell BS from a mile away. Nobody was going to buy really the immoralities of this, you know, German guy named Martin Luther. Nobody was buying that, right? And because we had a strong familial system, Catholicism always made sense, right? It was the heart of the Catholic faith. And so Italy was never affected by Protestantism. And that's what really the Masons understood, because once the Protestant nations up north accepted Protestantism, right, and it became the official religion, then it was easy, right? It was just easy to conquer Northern Europe in that sense. And that's why today, when you look at the Scandinavian nations and the Netherlands, I mean, they're beyond godless. I mean, they're marching in the New World Order, how crazy liberal they are, right? And I would argue the fruits of that begins with Protestantism. But as we see today, the rest of the world is kind of, or at least the last pockets of it that's resisting, are where? It's in the Catholic nations, or what once were the Catholic nations, right? When you talk about Western Europe, it's been much more decimated, but you look at Central Europe or Eastern Europe, like Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, all these countries, solidly Catholic nations, and they're fighting this New World Order behemoth as best they can. In countries like England, or should I say in countries like Italy, Spain, France, they've been able to go in there more through time and space, through liberalism, right? Through classical liberalism, and slowly erode away sort of the Catholic heritage and a lot of the values and the faith that once was dominant in that part of the world. And with, again, classical liberalism, you're naturally infusing a lighter form of secularism, right? It may not be as direct as the Bolsheviks, as the communists, right? But it's a lighter form, because classical liberals and communists are inherently cousins. It's both liberalism. One goes to the further extreme than the other. And so this is why, pretty much, when you see democracy that's kind of forced upon Italy at the end of World War II, that's where Italy's problems really begin, and why Italy has not been that stable of a country. That's why it's struggled so much since the end of World War II. It's why they can't get governments in order. It's why their economy is always weak. Lots of people out of work. It's problematic. Listen, when your only industry out there is tourism and bottled water and a little bit of jewelry, you know you got problems over there. You know you got problems. But a lot of this has to do really with the insertion of democracy and how it broke down culture and really the familial system, right? I think a lot of times as Americans, because we believe our system is the greatest of all time, that it can naturally fit into any nation that we want to, but it doesn't work that way, right? Because as Italians, it being naturally a Catholic culture, we don't determine our values, our principles, our morals, or even our laws by a show of hands. Don't do that. That's not the way Catholicism works. The foundational principles of any Catholic nation are dictated by the church, the laws of God, Christ, and really the church for that matter, right? And that's how nation governed for so long. And then we value families in Catholic nations. And here come, the classical liberals. Here come, here comes the contraception. Here comes the abortion issue. And there's wars and fights that begin to break out. Now, Italy has resisted a lot of that, but it's eventually caved in because it's so punitive now to fight against the liberal system, and because democracy can be manipulated. Democracy is a system of manipulation. Well, oligarchs can buy out the system in order to control the system itself. That's what it's always been from its origins. This idea of this utopian vision, the will of the people, self-governance. I get to choose who my rulers are. I have representative government because my opinion counts for something, right? That's our attitude. And yet here we are in America in 2021. You talk to people in the streets, and I'm in middle America. People are completely dispirited. People, even though they still have a right to vote, have never felt so dispirited, so powerless. The irony of that, right? And I would argue that if as Americans we won't really, waving our own pom-poms, we'd realize that this thing has been problematic for a long time. That's why America has been going to the far left since its founding, pretty much. But with Italians, you got a form of government that never made sense implemented. And the government takes an immediate hit, or should I say the economy takes an immediate hit. And for that matter, Italians start to flee. My family was part of that after World War II. You say, Frank, well, why not stick it out over there through great hardships, right? You Catholics believe in the principles of suffering. Yeah, it's true. But, for us Catholics, it's not all suffering. Suffering is a part of the plan. The one beauty about the Catholic Church or the Catholic faith, the Catholic religion, we know how to balance the natural and the supernatural, right? It's kind of the opposite with classical liberalism that says, okay, all emphasis on the natural and supernatural, whatever, we kind of believe, we kind of don't. We'll pretend like we believe in something because we got to fool these stupid Christians over here, right? That's how we always approach it, It's like I always said about American religious liberty and why it's problematic, right? Because we don't act like religion is real. And it starts in the Constitution, right? Our founding fathers never acted like it was real. Our founding fathers had very unorthodox beliefs, right? You say, well, the founding fathers were religious men. That's not the question. Satanists are religious when they go to Satanic Temple. The question is, were they Orthodox? No. The founding fathers of America were not Orthodox. And so that leads us into a lot of different areas here. Let me put it this way. You get massive migration coming into America post-World War II. America is a nation that did not have its infrastructure rocked at the end of World War II, unlike Italy, Germany, all devastated, right? But our history books say they were the bad guys, so they probably deserved it. On top of that, we go in there with a Marshall Plan, lots of American money to rebuild. And let me tell you something, if you're taking money from America or really from any other nation, right, you're going to be forced down a bunch of stipulations. We've seen that in our own government, right? We have a bunch of states that won't challenge the federal government anymore because they're taking federal money. It's the same thing here, right? You take money from America, guess what? They're going to have an influence over your policies and your politics. And that has played a role in Italy and all of Europe, for that matter, for a long time. Now, in Spain with Franco, listen, things got bloody, no doubt about it, and it's unfortunate. But Franco really made the choice. Did we let the Bolsheviks come in here? Because that was Bolshevik really entering into Spain, and Franco fought back as a devout Catholic. Now, in the eyes of history, he's viewed as a a villain. He's viewed as a murderous thug, but Franco has some tough decisions to make. See, because the effective problem is this: classical liberalism can't fight communism. This is why every nation that's governed via democracy eventually turns communist. It does, just like we are now in America. Because classical liberals and communists are distant cousins, right? They eventually meet in the middle somewhere, right? Say what you want about fascism, while disordered because it was founded on the basis of post-Enlightenment society, it's kind of a deviation away, right? Why does Mussolini rise? In my opinion, he rose because, again, they saw the same things that they were seeing in Spain, a Bolshevik revolution coming in. And guess what? Catholic nations weren't in favor of a lot of these principles of the Enlightenment. Mussolini rises, and now you got a fascist regime. Take it for what you want. There was disorder all over the place. And Catholic nations were trying to figure out how they were going to respond to this wave of liberalism sweeping the world. Because not everybody was buying this grand revolution. Not everybody wanted it. Our history books will tell us that, though. Freedom, liberty, everybody wants that, right? Wrong. Because everybody saw, not everybody, but a lot of people saw what would come down the pipe, what the end conclusion of liberalism actually is. And we're living through it today, where nothing makes sense anymore in the world, right? From politics to culture to destruction of family, right? Nothing makes sense anymore. This is the full fruition. And read a lot of the fascist writers of the time. I'm not defending fascism here because it was disordered. The moment the monarchs begin to question or have a sense of security about sort of their governance, their legitimacy, and the monarchs begin to retreat, what's left for those nations? Either you go down the path of some type of liberalism, which is classical liberalism or Bolshevism, or you try and create some half-ass, cobbled up authoritarian regime that kind of protects some old standards that resembles monarchy, I guess, to a certain extent, right? With a strong man leader. Because see, this is the problem that democracy always brings about. See, democracy is a cyclical ideology. It starts off with the will of the people over here, but democracy, with our fallen nature, it destroys everything in its path. And it eventually gives us a strong man leader. Because at the end of the day, democracy really never works. So you're either going to wind up with a tyrannical leader from the left or a tyrannical leader from the right. That's how human civilization has always worked. There's no such thing as a utopian democracy where the people walk in arms, and to the polls, and the will of the people, may the best man win, right? Kind of a thing, right? It doesn't work that way, especially when you put moral principles on the ballot. I mean, am I the only one? Am I the only one that thinks that America allowing a secular Supreme Court, a bunch of political appointees, to decide moral principles? I mean, the great moral principles that go back for thousands of years throughout sacred tradition, decisions that the church made for thousands of years, we have now handed it over to a bunch of political appointees that we call the Supreme Court in America. Is that nuts or is that crazy to me, right? So when the Supreme Court in America comes out and decides things like contraception, abortion, marriage, what right do they have? Those are prerogatives of the church and nobody else. Those are prerogatives of God. And our ancestors for thousands of years understood this. But here comes liberalism. Here comes freedom, baby. And look at the state of the world. Look at the state of the culture. And look at the family, how it's been destroyed within modernity. Absolutely obliterated. Doesn't make sense at all anymore. So, World War II happens. Italy loses, has to succumb to classical liberalism. And of course, Marxism is there, communism is right there. They got in there too. You've seen a lot of that in Italy over the years. And then of course, you've always had Freemasonry ever since the Grand Revolutions. And so that has all spelled a lot of problems for Italy. So you got, really massive amounts of immigration, people fleeing, looking for greener pastures. And it's understandable, to be honest. Very understandable. And I guess the thing that's most difficult is that, as Italians, well, it's a nation that's split into a lot of different kingdoms with a lot of different cultures. Within those smaller kingdoms and cultures, it's a strong familial bond, right? Strong familial ties. And I think that's been the hardest part of all with immigration. And this has been my experience, is that my generation and my children's generation are going to be radically different than my parents and my grandparents' generation. How we believe, what we value, how we live our lives. And in large part, it's part of the apostasy, right? Because when you come from a devout Catholic nation into a secular Freemasonic Protestant nation, you're going to get a chance to prosper, right? And there is some truth to that. In America, a lot of people have prospered, right? Even though things are getting more difficult now. That's because America is a nation that never balanced the natural from the supernatural, right? Right? So if you put the emphasis on the natural, it's only natural that in America you have lots of prosperity. And in that respect, that's why many Italians, Irish, Germans, Filipinos, Hispanics have come to America to try and participate of this way of life that's more prosperous in a natural sense. But there's a catch to it. There's a catch to that. You could come here, but we're Americans. We don't haggle over religion. Oh, no, 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 no. We got religious liberty. We got personal moral codes. We got personal Jesus. It was said that when Italian immigrants got here in the 1880s, 1920s, and even 1960s, one of the grand traditions of Italians was that the family would get together on Sundays, every Sunday, to make sure they still had this familial bond. But as time, space, and as the usury system and the New World Order has kind of crept into the economy, it's split apart everybody, including the Catholic family. And so that Sunday dinner table, which was an attempt to keep the familial bonds in America with these Catholic families, that has kind of broken down as well too. And it's unfortunate, right? Because the global economy, it doesn't allow us to stay together, right? It splits us all apart, right? You're working, I got my career, I got to go to New York, or I got to go to Los Angeles or Philadelphia, or whatever it may be. We're all split apart now, right? Where for hundreds of years, Italian family, that really most of the world for that matter, you lived in the same town, same family, cousins, aunts, uncles, that kind of stuff. There was migration. There's always been migrations to a certain extent, but because it's sad because what I've experienced, at least in immigration, is vastly different ideological principles and values from one generation to the next. All right. And I probably would start at my grandparents' generation, right? Devoutly Catholic. They come here, they work hard, they take care of themselves in many respects. They got a certain craft or art or trade, because that's what Italy was, right? Italy was a very artisan nation. It was a very, agricultural nation. Italians valued beauty. We valued sort of, growing our own foods and things of that nature, working hard. But it really doesn't take more than one generation to once a lot of these, again, secular values start to kick in. And because America is inherently a rebellious nation with values that are very opposite of American values, right? Let's start with the rebellious nature of America, right? You see an American nation where one generation rebels against the previous generation, which is strange as an Italian, because it's quite the opposite. In Italian culture, parents are honored, right? Now, it's right there in the Ten Commandments, right? Thou shalt honor thy mother and thy father. It makes sense. But of course, we have doctrine, dogma. We have, I guess, uniformity within Catholicism. We have a faith that's consolidated, right? That's in line with sacred tradition. But in America, it's quite different. You know, you turn 18, all right, dad, mom, dad, I'm out the door, kiss my ass. I'm gonna go to college, I'm gonna smoke pot, I'm gonna have sex, I'm gonna drink, I'm gonna party, and then after that, I'm gonna get a job and make the money. Right? I mean, it's almost like an American rite of passage now, which I always found strange. And what's interesting to me is that even if kids want to stay in the home a little bit longer once they turn 18 in the American family, let's say they want to work some things out, right, before they leave, because it's a tough world out there, right? The outside world, especially the classical liberal world, discourages that, right? Because as soon as you turn 18 and you're not out there doing something to participate in the economic engine of prosperity, you're a loser, you're worthless, you have no value in life. Because you got to go out there and be part of the economic engine of prosperity. Because that's what we do in America, right? We make the money, right? Why do you come to America, right? For a better way of life materially. And that's why I say the sacrifice is the faith. And that's why we tinker around with religion. We've got religious liberty. You do you, I do me. And as long as we don't cross each other's property lines, we don't shoot each other. That's American morality in a nutshell, right? And then you saw this. You saw this, you know, because the right likes to look at the left and say, oh, okay, all these communists have destroyed the family. And that's true in a lot of sense. Don't get me wrong. You know, the Marxists have been attacking the family for a long time, but the family has been assaulted on two fronts. The classical liberals have done it in their own way, primarily through economics, right? See, in my family, and this is just the way I was raised, okay? I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I find some inherent value in it. You don't leave the house, your parents' home, until you're married. Now, I can hear the classical liberals now screaming in horror kind of a thing, right? Because you're not out there producing the economic engine of prosperity. But see, for us Catholics, we believe there's a world of morality out there, right? The world is going to tempt you into sin, a lot of great sin that we're watching play out day by day by day right now. That's destroying the culture and the family. Something we warned you classical liberals about a long time ago. The reason why you don't leave the house until you're married is because just because you're 18 doesn't mean you're ready to deal with the influences of the world, the great evil that is looking to seduce you. See? Because family watches out after each other. And not just in the area of natural means, right? Somebody, you know, some boyfriend abuses your sister. Okay, we're gonna grab the posse and we're gonna go kick this guy's ass, kind of a thing, right? Yeah, there's some truth to that. That's part of it too. But as Catholics, we believe there's supernatural truths too. We protect our bodies, but we also protect our souls. And in a liberal nation where pornography is rampant, right? Contraception is rampant, inappropriate language, inappropriate behavior, blasphemy of God, all these vices in the name of liberty. Those are the elements. Those are the conditions. Those are the circumstances that take human nature down, that take a good soul and corrupt them. And how much corruption of the soul have we seen since the introduction of liberalism, right? You don't want your daughter sleeping around with 50 men before she decides to get married. Your daughter doesn't sleep with anybody before she gets married. You know why? Because sexuality is more than just a physical act, a physical exercise. It's just as much spiritual, psychological, emotional as it is physical. Look at the damage that's been done to young ladies in our culture, all because they had to go out there in the economic engine of prosperity and be free and get roommates and go to college and all this crap. And we have nothing but just a rash of global brokenness amongst young ladies and men for that matter too. Men get hit with the porn, right? See, staying in a home until you got married was a way to protect your children, because you never leave the familial guidance. You never leave the familial protection. You do some, research or some, what do you want to call it here? Vetting of a future spouse for your son or your daughter. Families play a role in the influence of that, because marriage is about the alliance of two families. It is. I know that seems old-fashioned, right? But that actually had a value. And guess what? Marriage is much more stronger when those values played out. They were. Not that attraction, physical attraction, or other things weren't important, but families played a role in that, right? But then again, that was a familial system. This is a kiss my ass, I'm an American system, right? See, that presents a lot of problems. You're in the home, you're in the family. The family protects you. You get married, you start your own instant family. There's levels of protection there from society at large. It's not just physical protection, but social and spiritual protection. And that's what we don't understand in America. We've never understood that. It's why this family is broken. It's why Americans have never formulated strong bonds within families. They never have, right? I mean, you may have a thing where, okay, you love your kids. I mean, there's a natural bond that comes along with having children. Don't get me wrong, right? But once you're 18, you got to get out of the house, or you're actually considered a lesser of a human being because you're not partaking of the economic engine of prosperity. Oh, and that's right. You're not out there drinking, doing drugs, having sex, getting abortions, getting pregnant, all that stuff. You're not, right? That's part of freedom and liberty in America, right? But what we've seen throughout the course of history and immigration is the faith slowly die in Catholic families. We've seen Italians, we've seen in Irish, we've seen in Germans, Polish, everybody. Grandparents get here. Great courage. I said in my last podcast, you really gotta be in marvel, in reverence over the decisions that our grandparents made. And I'm sure they were tough decisions to leave the motherland, fatherland, whatever you want to call it. But Freemasonry, secularism, whatever you want to call it, had crept into those nations in Europe. And it did cause devastating consequences, and decisions had to be made. And many chose to flee, understandably so. But again, there's a price to be paid once you come to a secular nation, a classical liberal nation. There's the benefits of economic prosperity. And a lot of us have fallen in love with that. And granted, I like it too. I'm not gonna lie to you. But the cost has been the faith, and the cost has been the family. Catholics have surrendered their families via contraception, via abortion, and ultimately forgetting about their faith. Because the emphasis in a classical liberal nation is on the natural, the supernatural, just whatever, personal Jesus. So in that sense, you do get great economic prosperity to a certain degree. I would argue a lot of it is usury system debt kind of stuff that can be questioned, but so you got this generational gap, right? Grandparents get here, next generation still faithful, but the faith waters down. Next generation, now we're warm, lukewarm, whatever the word is right now. It's kind of like, okay, I go to church on Sundays, or should I say once a year or twice a year, or Christmas or something like that. And then that fourth generation it's gone. The faith is wiped out. And once the faith is wiped out, there's really no need for the family anymore, right? Because now you've adopted classical liberal values, extreme individualism. I'm an individual. I do what I want to do. See, I know there's many Christians and Catholics out there that are marching to have abortion rights ended, and you know how horrible abortion is. And it is. But to be honest with you, abortion and contraception ain't going nowhere. It's not going to be delegalized, because part and parcel, it plays right into the hands of the usury system. It has to. And as we, get caught up in the world of naturalism, where, we got to make our own way and participate in the economic engine of prosperity, which means managing this massive debt system that we're all kind of born into. You know what? Large families get in the way, right? Children get in the way. In America, we're down to what? 1.7 children per household now. 1.6. We're not even replacing ourselves anymore, because we got the economic engine of prosperity, right? We got the mortgages we got to pay, the car payments we got to pay, all the bills in our lives that we got to pay, right? We call that freedom and liberty. You guys, you guys on the right, you guys are cute. Your concept of freedom and liberty is actually hilarious. Because people actually feel more enslaved in this system than they did under, than the peasants in medieval Europe did. At least those people had their land, right? They didn't force their wives out into the workforce, did they? The men could take care of their families with honor, with pride. You had women at home raising their children. A man can confidently go to work, earn his bread, take care of his family. Not now, not anymore, not in America. Both mom and dad have to go out into the workforce to support the household. And who's raising the kids? Who's raising the kids? MTV, the porn industry, rap music, name your entertainment system or whatever you got there, right? You wonder why we have a lost generation of millennials. And quite frankly, my generation, my 80s generation, wasn't much better. We're the ones that dropped the ball. 1960s generation started. We took it to the next step. Now we're raising this godless generation that we call the millennials, ironically enough. And I know a lot of people want to blame the millennials for all the problems in America, but that was our generation that raised those kids. And those kids, and the reason why those kids are so problematic is because they're the first generation born without any catechesis, without any formal training in the faith. They're completely godless. They don't know God. And once that happens, there's no moral standard anymore. Everything is relative, right? That's why a lot of these alternative lifestyles were always bound to rise. They're not going anywhere. They're not being stopped by anybody. It's only going to continue to progress. Let's put it that way. Then, of course, you throw Protestantism into the mix, which is another cluster fart. Excuse my language. Right? And a lot of Catholics that were poorly catechized have fallen for Protestantism. Now, eventually, of course, they drop religion altogether. As I said before, Protestantism is a precursor to eventually believing in nothing, right? Right? Because when religion turns into a form of entertainment or feel-good emotionalism kind of a thing, then it's not religion anymore. It's a show, is what it is, right? Like these rock band Christian churches kind of a thing, because they're trying to draw people in. You have to have a hook and angle, a line and hook, I should say, excuse me, right? Because religion in America, again, is in the business district. It's just one of many other businesses, right? Right next to the pizza shops and the porn shops and the and the liquor stores, whatever you may have it, you know. And so you got to put butts in the seats. That's how you survive. So what's your angle, right? It's a hustle in the end. And this is why American religious liberties never made sense. None. It's a farce, an absolute farce of contradictions. And when you have all these contradictions with different moral values and different standards, how do you think the unity of a nation is going to work out? How do you think? We're seeing it play out. There is no unity. It's playing out perfectly like Luther played it out. Luther decided to proclaim himself God with sola scriptura. What do Americans believe? We're all individual gods, especially now with all the technology. Holy cow. We're subhuman now, right? We're trying to live forever. We never even want to die anymore, right? Listen, everybody's experience is different. Like I said, I'm not the only son of an immigrant. And I'm not even suggesting I don't appreciate what I have. I do have lots of blessings here in America. I'll be the first to admit it. The problem is we never learned how to balance the blessings with eternal truth. And as a result, the culture in this country is paying the price. And we have to recognize that. And if we don't recognize that, we're never going to fix these problems. We're far beyond a political solution of this. You could talk to me about all the machinations of Washington, D.C., but if you got a bunch of immoral men up there, and that's what we have, a bunch of immoral men and women up there that have no guiding light of principles of truth, starting with our Savior, Jesus Christ, then it's all irrelevant. Either you're inspired by the light of Christ or something else inspiring you. I would suggest that's Satan. I recently had a classical liberal friend of mine, you know, who's moderately religious, asked me, wondering if we're seeing satanic influence over our government. Well, we Catholics have been talking about this for a long time, haven't we? A lot of us saw it coming. The entire Enlightenment was demonic, starting with the French Revolution that killed Catholics, murdered Catholics in cold blood because they wanted nothing more than to keep their monarch and their beloved church. Immigration to America. Has it been good or bad? I don't know. I don't know. Because there is a reality to the natural. We all want a better way of life, right? Nobody wants a grovel. I mean, things in Europe are difficult. But again, things were made difficult by Masonic infiltration. That's the irony of it all, because you can't even say they're Catholic nations over there anymore. They may have a historical Catholic roots over there, right? But immigration has meant that many Catholics have lost their faith. And you got to wonder if our grandparents knew that this prosperity would come at the cost of their families losing the faith, would have they come? I'm asking that question because they were devout. They were devout. Now, they were sold on religious liberty, right? We had Catholic churches here, right? So you come to America, you make your money, you can still honor and celebrate and worship your Catholic faith in the name of religious liberty, right? Great selling point, right? Great catchphrase, right? Great, business deal kind of a thing. But the problem is that in a nation that's indifferent toward religion, in a nation where religion can be used and essentially be put in a business district, how is that going to affect Catholics? right? And it's the manipulation to get butts in the seats and to manipulate religion so certain individuals could use religion for their own personal gain. How would that affect Catholics? I think we've seen it. I mean, we had a mass exodus from the church in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, thank goodness, some great Catholic apologists have come our way. But there was a mass exodus after Vatican II, a mass exodus where evangelicals, fake two-day Protestant religions were preying on Catholics, using easy peasy feel-good Christianity to really take a lot of Catholics from Holy Mother Church. And because we were far away from the motherland, we didn't have the deep culture here. I mean, there was some, don't get me wrong. The Catholic Church was flourishing in the 40s and 50s. But after Vatican II, a lot of Catholics became easy prey. And I think you throw into the mix a lot of the prosperity, or at least the high finance kind of usury system that began to introduce a lot of excesses into sort of our daily lives, our comforts, our gadgets, and things like that. They really began to kick off in around the 60s and 70s, maybe even the 50s, actually. It was a perfect mix to destroy the Catholic family. I never understood. I guess, and this is just me, I have such reverence for my family, my mother, my father, my grandparents. The values they taught me, the values not only of my faith, but to work hard, to be passionate, to be a good and decent person. Those are the values that I've always cherished. When I see Catholics flee for Protestant churches, I can't help but think to myself, right? How could you be such an ingrate? Generation and generation and generation of Catholic family, and you decide for your own reasons that it's not right for you? What? You found something better than what your mom, your grandparents, your great-grandparents believed? Sorry. But then again, there's marketing. It's America, right? It's America, religious liberty. It's marketing. It's in the business district, right? Competition, just like any other business. So this is where you come up with the easy peasy drive-through Christianity, right? Your rock band Christianity, or your handling snakes Christianity, whatever it is that enamors you. And lots of Catholics fell for that. They abandoned the faith of their ancestors. And it's disappointing. And quite frankly, it hurts. Because the beautiful thing about us Catholics is we're not extreme individuals. We're family. It's a familial system. I've said that over and over and over. Even the way we look at God, right? The Protestants have reduced it down to this personal Jesus thing. I accepted Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior, I'm saved. We Catholics look at God as a family. Why? He's Father, He's Son, He's Holy Spirit. And if you read your scriptures, He gives us His mother at the foot of the cross. Because what is a family without a mother? The saints are our brothers and sisters in the faith, the communion of saints. God is a family. Yeah, Christ the King, He's our Savior. But God is also a Trinity, our beloved God. And I believe the family here in America, and the faith, and even the nation, is supposed to resemble the hierarchy, which is God the Father and the Blessed Trinity in heaven. God is a family. And it's our duty to really follow in line with that. That's what He laid out for us. And we rebelled all against it in the name of liberty, right? I would argue we rebelled against it in large part because we wanted to justify the sins below the belt, right? Yeah. Started with Martin Luther and King Henry. Yeah, it did. I'm sorry. A lot of people, when I mentioned that, a lot of people, especially class global, tell me, you're playing politics, Franks. There was real doctrinal issue. No. No, no, no. The sins below the belt always play a factor. Just like, guess what? Sins below the belt are destroying America today. And classical liberals have no answers for that, do they? Yeah. The disordered life is rampant in America. And what if classical liberals told me, oh, Frank, we lost the culture war. Let's just focus on economics. Right? That's what classical liberals tell me. How's that worked out for you, huh? The United States of America, or is it the communist states of America? That's what it's looking like more every day. Now you guys are talking about secession. All right. Good luck with that. Listen, let me say something good about America. I do appreciate the opportunities it gave to my family and even myself. Because Freemasonry really hit hard Italy. Democracy hit hard Italy. And in that sense, it was a good place to go where you could, to a certain extent, prosper and still practice your faith. But it was always limited in scope. It was always going to collapse in the end. Because without true faith, true religion, you don't have the mechanism to fight off Satan, the prince of darkness all over the world. And this is why it looks like he now governs the entire globe. Our Lady said that this great apostasy will consume the church and the world. I don't think there's any doubt that we're there at this point in time. What's the resolution? Well, it comes down to true faith, true religion, true principles. We Americans believe that we could solve everything through politics, because politics in America has become our sort of our national religion of sorts, right? It's how we determine right from wrong, good from evil, all that good stuff. It's how we determine our moralities and things like that. And I would suggest it's not the answer. You cannot have an entire nation of people full of disorders in their lives and then not only get to DC and do the right thing, but get to the ballot box and do the right thing. We see it all the time in America. The biggest scoundrels in our society rise to the top and we elevate them to governance. And they rule all over our lives, all of them. The biggest pieces of crap, excuse my language. Because that's just what it is in America. And then we pull our hair out. What's happened to America? What's happened? This is not the America I know. First principles. We've never dealt that with in America. First principles, right? In the world of Catholicism, the first principle is to honor and to love God. Number two, love your neighbor as you love yourself. In America, we never honored God. We never established first principles. We said, let's just go out there and make the money and enjoy the natural elements of the world, which is a partial truth. There's nothing wrong with that inherently as part of a bigger, better plan, such as honoring God. But when you elevate a partial truth to your highest element and you omit eternal truth, you got a problem. You create a disordered society. If you guys are going to tell me now that secession is the answer, fine. But can we admit that the alignment failed? Can we admit that America maybe was a disaster from the beginning? Because that's what the admission is now. That's what it is if you're talking about secession now, right? And I'm not talking about secession. I'm not in favor of secession. That's just me. But you guys on the right, you guys that accepted classical liberal principles, some point you got to admit your failures if we come to the point of talking about secession, which Lincoln already said, nah, you can't do it. Can't do it. You see where we're at here, guys? To close out, I'll say this. Italian immigration. Very simple. First, you lose your language. Then you lose your Italian culture. And then you lose your Catholic faith. That's what history dictates. That's what happens with immigration in America. It may take 2 or 3 or 4 generations, but that's how Catholicism, the faith, and inherently our Italian inheritance dies off. And why wouldn't it? We're not in Italy anymore, and we're not in the Catholic nation anymore. First goes the language, then goes the culture, then goes the faith. And that's the destruction of the Catholic family in America. Now, some of this happening, well, a lot of this happening in Italy over there, but it's different, right? It's a little bit different in Italy, why it's happening. And maybe we could talk about that some of the time. But this is also a pattern in the entire world. Listen, I point out America because it's most obvious to me, right? It's easy here. I could analyze everything, but it's happening throughout all of the West. And all nations that have embraced liberalism, that have embraced democracy, are quasi-communist now. Let's be honest, right? Has immigration been good or bad? I don't know. Maybe there wasn't a choice in the end because Italy's just as big of a mess as America is, to be honest with you. But I guess I just hold more hope for Italians in Italy because there's a history there. And I think at some point that's going to matter. It is the home of the faith. I think at some point that's going to matter. It's going to be the last bastion of hope once all this collapses. I think the only thing holding up America right now before it really collapses. See, I don't talk about secession or anything like that. I just don't think it's not. I don't think it's going to happen. I just think America will dissolve at some point. That's the trajectory we're on. I hope I'm wrong, but I believe that's what's going to happen. But but as far as the fatherland, I get confused with those two. I forgot what it is. I always get corrected. I use them interchangeably. I always get corrected on it. I think it's fatherland is what it is, right? They got the problems there too. Don't get me wrong. Masonic infiltration has really done them in. Democracy has really done them in. But in America, we got our own problems. All I'm saying is that without the faith, none of this gets fixed. None of it. None of it. Where the Catholic Church goes, the world goes. Because the Catholic Church is in a state of crisis, the world is in a state of crisis, because the church is the only moral arbiter of truth. The church has its problems. We know that. It's obvious. But that's not a reason to leave the church. To be introspective, we can see how there's a correlation between the crisis in the church and the crisis in the culture and the political system and destruction of the family. When the church is healthy, the world is healthy. None of the West happens without the Catholic Church. And for that reason, the West can't survive without the Catholic Church. That's what made Italian families so big, strong, and beautiful. The moment Italian families drop the Catholic faith is the very same moment they become just as disordered as any Protestant nation family. And that is, you don't have a family, Hold the faith, my friends. My Catholic brothers and sisters, hold the faith. Because all this material stuff, it's going to be gone one day. None of this is going to matter. All this talk about the economic engine and prosperity, take it for what it's worth. But just remember, none of this goes into the next world with us. What's most important is that we preserve our faith. We honor the one true triune God, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and that we protect our families and that we raise our families in the faith. There's nothing more important than that. There you have it. This is Frank. Signing off. Frank speaking.